step into the glimmering world of old Hollywood where the stars shined bright, but, honestly, the shadows were even darker. Tonight, we pull back the velvet curtain of glamour to expose the haunting truths behind Tinseltown's most iconic legends. In the Golden Age, fame was manufactured, secrets were buried, some stories have clawed their way back from the grave, they're more chilling than any script. Number 4. The Devil in Disguise. Errol Flynn, with his devil-may-care smile and rakish charm, seemed destined to be Hollywood's golden boy. His roles as swashbuckling heroes, dashing lovers made him a legend, but behind the scenes, a far more sinister portrait emerged. Flynn's reputation for wild parties and reckless behavior wasn't just Hollywood gossip, it was a warning. The stories began as mere rumors, late-night escapades, whispered affairs, a taste for danger that bordered on the criminal. Flynn's personal life was a kaleidoscope of excess. Number 3. Hollywood's fallen giant. If Errol Flynn was Hollywood's devil-may-care rogue, Roscoe "Fatty" Arbuckle was its jester, until the laughter died. Once the highest-paid actor in silent film, Arbuckle's name was synonymous with comedy. He wasn't just a comedian, he was an innovator. Despite his large frame, Arbuckle moved with a surprising, almost balletic grace, a master of physical comedy who could elicit roars of laughter with a simple glance. He mentored other future legends, including Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin, and in 1921, he signed a contract with Paramount Pictures for an unprecedented $1 million a year, making him the highest-paid star on the planet. His films were box office gold, his face a beloved symbol of pure, unadulterated joy. But all it took was one night in San Francisco to transform him from America's sweetheart into a pariah. It was September 1921, and Arbuckle was at the height of his fame. He had just finished 3 pictures back-to-back and decided to drive up to San Francisco for a Labor Day weekend getaway. It was the height of the Roaring Twenties, an era of jazz, illegal speakeasies, and a rebellion against the stuffy morals of the previous generation. Hollywood was the epicenter of this new hedonism, and its stars were seen as modern-day gods, living lives of unimaginable excess. A party at the St. Francis Hotel promised extravagance. Arbuckle checked into a suite of rooms, and the bootleg gin began to flow. Among the guests was a young, ambitious actress named Virginia Rappe. Accounts of what happened next are a tangled mess of conflicting testimonies and sensationalism. Rappe was seen entering a bedroom with Arbuckle. A short time later, other guests heard screams. They found Rappe in agony on the bed, her clothes torn. Arbuckle claimed she had a history of chronic health issues and had simply fallen ill from the bootleg alcohol. But another partygoer, Maud Delmont, a woman with a dubious past of her own, told a far more sinister story. Virginia Rappe died days later in a sanitarium from a ruptured bladder and peritonitis. Delmont's story, alleging a brutal assault by Arbuckle, was all the press needed. The whispers began almost immediately, but they weren't just whispers. They were thunderous headlines amplified by the newspaper empire of William Randolph Hearst. Hearst saw the scandal as the perfect vehicle to crusade against what he viewed as Hollywood's moral decay, and to sell millions of newspapers. The story exploded. Arbuckle was arrested for murder. He was tried not once, but 3 times. The first 2 trials resulted in hung juries. The prosecution's case was weak, relying on flimsy evidence and unreliable witnesses. But in the court of public opinion, fueled by Hearst's relentless smear campaign, Arbuckle was already guilty. Finally, in the 3rd trial, the jury took only 6 minutes to acquit him. 5 of those minutes were spent writing a formal apology. "Acquittal is not enough for Roscoe Arbuckle," they wrote. "We feel that a great injustice has been done him. There was not the slightest proof adduced to connect him in any way with the commission of a crime." But it was too late. The damage was done. Hollywood, terrified of public backlash, instituted morality clauses in actor contracts. Arbuckle was made the first casualty, blacklisted from appearing in his own films. His career, his fortune, and his reputation were annihilated. He was a giant, felled not by a court of law, but by the court of public opinion, a cautionary tale of how quickly the spotlight can turn into an inferno. Coming in at number 2 is a story that will not just shock you, it will forever change the way you see Hollywood's golden age. We're talking about the Queen of Pain, Joan Crawford. The name itself evokes an almost mythical image of stardom. With her razor-sharp cheekbones, impossibly wide eyes, and a commanding presence that could dominate any scene, she was the definition of a movie star. For nearly 5 decades, from the silent era to the swinging 60s, she reigned as Hollywood royalty. She clawed her way up from a desperate, impoverished childhood to become one of the highest-paid women in America, culminating in a hard-won Oscar for her role in. To the public, she was the ultimate professional, a perfectionist who personally answered every piece of fan mail, but behind the carefully curated image of the perfect starlet, a far more complicated and deeply disturbing story was unfolding. Her obsession with control wasn't just a professional quirk, it was a suffocating force in her private life. Her icy poise, so captivating on screen, masked a tempest of rage that threatened to destroy everyone in her orbit, especially those she claimed to love the most. The pristine facade of her life was shattered in 1978, a year after her death, with the publication of an explosive memoir by her adopted daughter, Christina. The book was titled, and it landed on the cultural landscape like a bomb. It was one of the first celebrity tell-alls of its kind, and it didn't just pull back the curtain, it tore the entire theater down. The book painted Crawford not as a glamorous icon or a loving mother, but as a sadistic, alcoholic, and abusive tyrant. The allegations were shocking and relentlessly cruel. Christina described a childhood governed by her mother's terrifying whims. There were the infamous midnight raids, where a drunken Joan would wake her children and force them to scrub floors with harsh chemicals for imaginary specks of dirt. She wrote of lavish Christmas gifts being paraded in front of them, only to be locked away moments later because the children weren't deemed sufficiently grateful. It was a campaign of relentless emotional manipulation, a pursuit of perfection that bordered on sadism. But one image, above all others, seared itself into the public consciousness. Christina recounted a terrifying, violent rage triggered by the discovery of a cheap wire hanger in her closet. The phrase, "no wire hangers, ever," became a cultural touchstone, transforming a simple household object into an icon of maternal terror. This single, horrifying anecdote came to define Joan Crawford's entire legacy, eclipsing her decades of work. But the truth behind the myth is as complex and murky as Crawford herself. The 1981 film adaptation, starring a ferocious Faye Dunaway, cemented the monstrous image of Crawford in pop culture, but its campy, over-the-top style also led many to question the story's complete accuracy. Furthermore, Crawford's other 2 children, twins, Kathy and Cindy, fiercely defended their mother, claiming Christina's book was a work of fiction. Friends and Hollywood legends like Myrna Loy and Douglas Fairbanks Jr. also spoke out, describing a woman who was tough and demanding, but not the monster Christina depicted. So who was the real Joan Crawford? Was she a victim of her own traumatic upbringing, a woman whose desperate need for control spiraled into abuse? Or was Christina's account the unvarnished truth about a psychopath hiding in plain sight? The controversy effectively erased the line between the Oscar-winning actress and the wire hanger-wielding monster, leaving behind a chilling and unresolved Hollywood legend. The world may never know the full story, but the specter of Mommy Dearest ensures that Joan Crawford's name will forever be associated with the darkest side of fame. Number 1. The Clown's Darkest Hour. Charlie Chaplin, the beloved tramp, is more than just a recognizable figure. He was a global phenomenon. In an era before talkies, his silent comedy transcended language and culture. With his bowler hat, cane, and signature waddle, he became the world's first true movie star, a symbol of resilience who made millions laugh through the Great Depression and 2 world wars. But the man who brought so much joy to the world was privately battling demons that would have crushed a lesser person. Behind the curtain, away from the adoring crowds, Chaplin's life was a labyrinth of scandal, controversy, and devastating secrets that threatened to erase his legacy entirely. While his genius on screen was undeniable, his personal life was a recurring disaster. Chaplin had a notorious and predatory weakness for alarmingly young women. His second wife, Lita Gray, was just 16 when they married, leading to one of the most scandalous and public divorces in Hollywood history. The court documents, filled with lurid accusations, were sold on street corners, turning his private life into a public spectacle. Then came the Joan Barry affair, a paternity suit that dragged his name through the mud for years. Despite blood tests proving he wasn't the father, the court of public opinion, and a rigged legal system, found him liable. The scandal painted him as a moral degenerate, a predator, hiding behind a lovable mask. And all the while someone was watching. J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI had been building a massive file on Chaplin for years, convinced he was a communist sympathizer due to the anti-capitalist themes in films like E. The FBI saw his personal scandals as the perfect weapon. They used the Joan Barry case to charge him under the Mann Act, a federal law against transporting women across state lines for other RG and immoral barben per barder for barber abin brother tinber bosses. Though acquitted, the damage was done. The final blow came in 1952. While sailing to London for the premiere of his film, Chaplin received a telegram. U.S. Attorney General James McGranary had revoked his re-entry permit. The man who had made America his home and built Hollywood was now in exile, barred from the country that had made him a star. The world's greatest clown had been silenced, not by the advent of sound, but by the crushing weight of his own secrets and the political machine that used them against him. The golden age of Hollywood dazzled the world with its stars, but tonight, we've peeled back the glittering facade to reveal the darkness lurking beneath. Errol Flynn's reckless scandals, Fatty Arbuckle's ruinous trial, Joan Crawford's chilling legacy, Charlie Chaplin's painful exile. These legends remind us that Hollywood's shine is often paid for in suffering and secrecy. Which of these stories shocked you the most?